Hi, Alice here. Get ready. 3 to do things before spring. If you enjoy having butterflies, bees, pollinators, and birds in your yard, take a look at 3 things that will help you be successful. My number one thing to do now, plan the work. Join me on a walkabout and let's check out the 4 garden areas where I'm going to be doing planning. I'll be providing gardening tips as we go along, even if you're in a zone where it's not quite warm enough yet, the ground may still be frozen. These are items that no matter what your zone, getting ready for your springtime planting, they're things that you do. I am looking forward to taking an inventory of my gardens. I'm going to focus on areas where I have specific plants for butterflies, pollinators, a bed on the right and a bed on the left. And both of them are intended for perennials. I'm going to look for plants where I've left the stems on to help the plant overwinter, for pollinators that will still be nesting in stems. I'm going to see if I can cut back, like here. This plant is a Stokes aster. Some of my plants are getting crowded by Florida betony, which, while a native plant, is going to outcompete my plants if I don't remove it. In a previous video, I shared about this. I was reading about pollinator garden preparation for spring, and one of the extension agents in North Carolina coined rescue weeding, and that is weed your perennials that are getting overcrowded first, then go back and weed other parts. There are some stems that I will be able to cut back. These are on the starry rosin weed. My dotted horsemet has stems. This is a liatris that I planted. I can cut this one back. I want to check out my Mary garden. Not too much weeding to do. My third bed is what I call a circle garden, and I've identified already some starry rosinweed here, the firebush in the back, for sure. The Texas sage back here has Florida betony growing all around the stem and the root areas. The fourth area is my sand area with native plants, and it's pretty clear with the exception of the weeds around the Solidago. So I finished the inventory of the garden areas that I'm going to be concentrating on, and being one person, I think that's plenty. Number one is I'm going to plan. Now that I know what I need to do on either cutting back for pollinators nesting before spring or rescue weeding, I'm going to do that this month. And as I am looking things over, the next thing I'm going to add to my plan is, are there any bare spots that I want to fill in? And if so, what kinds of native plants am I going to put in there? Is there going to be any fall color? That would add a little extra interest to the yard. That will determine what I put on my shopping list. I'll have to decide if I want to put some other annuals that are warmer season annuals in the front, where I had planted some cooler season annuals. Finally, for my plan, do I want to plant maybe 5 or even 7 of one plant species so that I have a patch or a block of color, or a variety of plants? Because diversity of plants is very important, and having things blooming at each of the major seasons like spring, summer, and fall is also very important. In the planning area, at some point I want to make a shopping list, but I'm going to defer my shopping list till later in the month or the beginning of next month because I'm not going shopping now. I learned my lesson years ago when I lived in Chicago. I was a new gardener and we'd had a long, hard winter. The rule of thumb in Chicago was go shopping at the garden center Memorial Day. That was the earliest planting day. I was driving and one of the garden centers had all these plants out on the curb. They were just so beautiful. And it was 2 weeks before Memorial Day. And I thought, oh, it's warm now. I had the windows down, the sun was shining. So I spent all of my budget for my plants. And I was newly married. We were on a tight budget. I brought the plants home. I put them in the planters. We lived where we had a balcony, and I put them out on the balcony, and they were doing fine. The weekend before Memorial Day, the temperature dropped 40 degrees and the wind blew, and all of this happened in the nighttime. When I got up in the morning, my plants were fried. So I learned that it's best to follow the last frost date wherever you live and have your plan in place, know what you want, and then go shopping when the time is appropriate. So that's just my personal tip for try to restrain yourself. And if you start going looking at plants in the garden centers, they're pushing things out now to entice people to shop. Try not to get bedazzled like I did. But if you do, be prepared that you may have to bring them inside or cover them and then uncover them and then cover them again. And if that's okay with you, that's fine. The number two thing to do for your pollinator garden now is to cut back stems of plants. And I had pointed out the stems of the plants on my walk around with you that I was going to cut back to 8 inches above the ground. That will allow for the pollinators, especially native bees, to have nests. You'll have a pollinator rich environment when everything is warmer and the bees come out and start flying. The first area to try to trim back some of the stems for the pollinator nesting cavities is my Stokes aster. I'm going to measure just to make sure that I'm not way off base. And 8 inches is about here. If I bring it to this mark on the side of the trowel, that'll be about 8 inches. That's a good way to measure what I'm doing. So here's one, and I'll just do the rest. This is my first time doing this, and I assume that for some of the stems that are bigger, this is a more effective strategy. This is another area, and I like this one because this is the Solidago or goldenrod. The stems are a little bit larger, and using my measure, there's one. So I'll try to make them all about the same cut. And what's nice is that this is a job that goes quickly. Okay, this is a much bigger one. One thing it does, it changes the bed from looking really straggly, looking a little bit more conscious. I enjoy the more conscious look. The third thing to do at this time is to weed. And I know a lot of us, weeding, put it off, put it off. If you're in the North Central Florida area, this is the time to start. If you're in cooler zones, you need to wait until it's not so cold and you're not having snow and your ground is not frozen. If it's an overwhelming task, like I have these 4 gardens. That seems overwhelming to me. So prioritize which plants you're going to weed first. Go for the plants that are getting overcrowded. Weeds are crowding up, they're kind of growing over the plant or they're all around the plant. And remove those first. Rescue weeding. You're getting rid of the things that are sucking the vitality out of the plant because they're competing with the plant's roots for nutrients, for water. And as they grow, if they're large, then they're also blocking sun. On my survey, I identified this as one of the priority areas for weeding because it's an overgrowth of unwanted plants or weeds, and they are competing now with this Texas sage. So I'm going to free up the sage. I'm doing hand weeding, spot weeding. I don't use pre-emergent or other herbicides on my lawn or on my plants. But I have found that by consistently weeding during the growing season and even when things are dormant like they are now, that instead of having the whole bed overrun, I just have pockets and I can clear those out. My rescue weeding, and it looks so much better than it did. These first 3 things to do before spring comes are critical steps to get you off to a successful start with your gardening this year. Planning, always important, and the winter time is a great time for reflection and thinking about what you want to do and try for a new growing season. Second is cutting back stems of perennials that can be ideal nesting sites for pollinators so that you're providing a habitat and you can improve the pollinator activity in your garden and also help promote some of our endangered species. And the third thing is to weed. Rescue weeding first. So anything choking out any of your perennials or other plants, you don't want them to overcome with your native plants or other perennials. You want a good start by following these 3 things and trying to get them done before spring starts. You will be providing the right environment for your plants to thrive. When your plants thrive, your pollinators, your butterflies, your bees, and your birds thrive. And when your environment is thriving, you're thriving. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please either leave a comment below or contact your local Cooperative Extension agent. For me, I use Lisa Strange. She's a horticulturist in Taylor County. There are extension agents over all the USDA hardiness zones. Take advantage of the resources that you have at hand. If interested, additional videos to watch. And if you've not subscribed, subscribe. Garden Yay! See you soon.